How curiosity can scale your business. Hey, I'm Donnie Bovine, the CEO and founder of Success Champion Networking and author of Endless Stream of Referrals. This is Growth Mode, a podcast all centered around growing and scaling your business. Hanging out with me as always is Kevin Snow, the sales and automation tactician and genius. And this episode, we're really going to talk about how curiosity's really helped us scale our business and how you can do it too. So, this was fun for me. One of my coolest early wins when I was selling, and I'll go back to commercial printing, is I was calling on a lot of manufacturers because somebody had told me that if you get a manufacturers and they have a lot of SKUs, a lot of parts, they will traditionally do a lot of different printing. And I at this point, I'd won a lot of small deals, but I hadn't landed any big clients. And I don't want to say there was pressure on me to get a big win, but there was expectations that I should have some bigger clientele coming in. And I called on this company called Hawk Electronics and, you know, somehow got to the right person. They invited me in to come to their office. And I was so old school sales at that point that I took my binder with me, to do my, wow them, presentation. And that'll tell you how long ago this shit was. But as I went in there, even going through the binder and trying to go through my presentation, I could tell they just weren't into it. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure why I didn't continue with my presentation, other than it was like this vibe that they just didn't give a shit about me flipping through my 3-ring binder, trying to show them all we could do. And out of the blue, I just asked the question, so how did you get in this role? And the whole dynamic started to change. And she started walking me through, her career and how she got here and how she, got this position and how she started low in the company and then worked her way up to here. And now she was aiming for a higher position down the road. And the conversation went from one-sided, me doing the presentation, to flipping to us having just a fun get to know you conversation. And I walked out with an actual PO. They actually, ordered something that I knew the pricing of all the time, which was this postcards, that format that we did. And she wrote me a PO by the time it was done. And it took me a while afterwards to understand what had happened. And it came down to, once I got rid of my presentation, started actually getting curious about them, a lot of cool things happened. And I think in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about sales, but we're going to focus more on how all the curiosity of Kevin and I exploring different business ideas and business concepts and the likes has really helped us scale this bitch.
Yeah, I think it's really important to throw out there, if you want to scale, you need to be curious. You need to be exploring and looking at different options, but you need to be willing to fail.
Yeah.
So we have within Success Champions, we have a saying, let's go break shit. And this is really our mantra for how we've grown the business. But that's really hard for some people, though. It's cool to be curious and to learn stuff, but then you have to make sure you do that next step in it and actually try it.
Yeah, I would say inside of that, one of the coolest things that we have done is come up with a concept, kind of get this minimal viable product, idea, service, project, whatever, and then go and actually let things fall apart. I mean, fuck, you can go back and look at Success Champion Networking, and we went from idea to first meeting in 7 days. And if you look at that first iteration of how we launched the chapters to where we are now, 2 completely different worlds. Because we started out the gate, Donnie's like, all right, go run a meeting, do whatever you want to do. And now we have structures, processes, and systems, more Kevin style, which we totally needed. But if we hadn't pulled the trigger and done that first group, that first meeting, that first style, we wouldn't have fucked up enough things to actually make it work. And so the idea of go break shit isn't about purposely fucking things up. It's about coming up with a new idea or a new technology or a new thought process and getting curious enough about it that you will actually go try it so shit starts breaking.
So I see a quote pop across Facebook every once in a while, and every time I see it, I chuckle and think about us. And it goes like, "Wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions."
That is 100% our company.
But that is, that's kind of really how curiosity works. There's something going on in the marketplace, you're like, oh, I want to learn about that and figure out, how do I try it, how do I implement it in my company, will it work in my company, and getting that initial information and then saying, all right, let's go, let's test it out. And we've done that a few times where we test it out and like 24 hours later we're like, ooh, and we're not doing that again.
That
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
But other times it's like, oh, this actually was really cool. It gave us things that we didn't expect. But if we hadn't tried it, we never would have gotten to that point. You can learn too much.
For sure. And, I think a lot of small business owners, especially year one, and I bet you would say the same thing, is that first year of business, man, you're fucking just trying to do anything. You're the full on business whore, just saying yes to whatever will come through the door because you literally don't know what your business fully is. You have ideas, you have thought processes. I mean, even you started off as more of the speaker, trainer type of person, and now had went to deployment, came back, and had to completely flip your business model. And I think that a lot of people, like, if you're listening to this and you don't fully understand or can't explain to somebody else what your business is, it's because you either have been trying to sell something that nobody wants, or you haven't been curious enough and tried enough shit till you finally figured out that thing that people are like, fuck yes, I want to buy that. And I think for a lot of things, I mean, we've taken a couple of projects quite a long ways before we finally decide, okay, this just isn't doing what we needed to do. It's time to pivot and go a different direction. And it's the exploration of doing the thing that helps you figure everything else
So
out.
Google actually has built a whole division around this premise of curiosity.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because they literally have people who are really smart people coming up with, I want to learn about this, and I want to figure out how, I have this idea and I want to see if it would work. And they get paid bonuses when they fail because they want
Yeah.
them to take the risk and to go and follow
Well,
through.
they get paid bonuses when they shut down
Yeah,
their own
exactly.
project.
When they when, when
That
when they get to the
yeah.
point of saying this isn't actually scalable or this isn't a sustainable solution for this world problem, we're ending the research and we're going to go now do this and make a new team. And then they get recognized in front of the company, and they get given a bonus check in front of the company for determining that, yeah, this isn't a thing. And they've really built in that whole curiosity thing as to what drives their business forward, and allowing people that ability to be curious, but telling them it's okay if it doesn't work. And I think,
Yeah.
we from such a young age, we are taught the exact opposite.
Yeah, for sure.
So, being able to put that type of culture into your business and allowing your employees and your team members to do that is such a huge, it gets rid of such a huge roadblock for you being able to move the company forward.
Yeah, because I think if you're not looking at your people and letting them go fuck up, they're never gonna try anything new. Right? They're never gonna try and figure out better ways to do it. It's like the funny saying that you should go hire lazy people because lazy people figure out the faster, better
Yeah.
way to do everything because they want to be fucking lazy, But it's the same thing with curiosity. Is I'd rather have somebody like Kevin does this all the time. He's like, "Ooh, I got to show you something," because he's trying all this new crazy shit. And there's sometimes I'm like, "Hey, that's really fucking cool." And then there's sometimes I'm like, "Yeah, okay," but I try and make him feel good about it, Um, but it comes down to if he didn't have the permission, and like he doesn't need permission for me to do anything, but if he didn't have the permission to go test and try and explore, be curious and work on new things, we'd get stagnant really fucking quick because we would just be doing the same shit over and over again. And it's that stagnant side of things that stifles growth. That was hard to say.
So yes, and I want to make sure people understand that we aren't saying you need to go do these huge pivots and make these huge
No.
changes into what your business is and what your business model is. What we're talking about is being curious and looking for ways to evolve and to what is the next iteration of your product? What is the next iteration of your service? What is the next iteration of how you interact with clients? How do you make things better? And how do you grow?
Yeah, prime example inside of that is we launched chapter guides for our chapters. So when a chapter hits a certain level, we turn it over to another Success Champion Networking member, and they help us, mentor and train and get information out to the chapters. Well, when we first did that, we kind of said, "Hey, just come back and give us some feedback." Well, it took about 2 days later. Kevin came back and goes, "Hey, I built a form." And this whole form had this thing where they could have a drop down box where they could do all the shit, fill out all this information, and do all the things. And it was not something we'd ever thought about doing because we didn't necessarily need it. But he had to go figure out specifically, how do they get the information back to us? So it's like more of an automated process. And we had a quick way to be able to decipher that information. And that's the kind of things we're talking about when we say get curious is what can you do inside of what you're already doing to make it better, stronger, faster? What can you test? What can you do? And the fun thing about him creating that form, I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't even know he was creating it. So I had like this I had no expectations. It was just something he brought to the table and said, "Hey, look what I did." I'm like, that's actually pretty fucking cool. And that's a lot of what we're doing when we're talking about getting curious is don't sit on one way of always doing things. Have your processes and systems so they're duplicatable, but also be willing to go and try and break the way of doing it by finding better, stronger ways. Doesn't mean we haven't done big pivots, but most times we're doing micro curiosity things that open the door for us to be able to do a lot of other
So
things.
for those of you that are following along at home, that is a second episode in a row that he's complimented me. Last time I was smart, and this time I am cool. So
Oh, we might have gotten some emails and some messages to say, "Fuck, you really pick on Kevin." So, he's now keeps a box of Kleenex next to his desk because,
I,
but,
I get done
but,
recording an
and he let me get me through that entire fucking diatribe of my statement just so he could come back and say, "Hey, Donnie said something nice about
I
me."
sure did. I may have a bottle of alcohol next to me for after recording sessions. Just saying.
He's like 2 shot glasses cheering himself.
I gotta have one
That's
before and
awesome.
then one
That's
after.
awesome.
No, so the curiosity thing is really huge as a business owner, but it's also really big. And you talked about a little bit at the beginning as a salesperson, because it's really easy to stagnate as a salesperson and how you're doing your thing. And I had this, especially when I was doing the Nextel thing, where I just assumed that I knew what was going on in a business because I had sold 4 more of those types of businesses last month. So I knew what was going on in the trucking company. I knew what was going on with the construction company. And there was a point in time where I started seeing my closings go down because I had gotten away from my process where I asked all the questions and I heard the
Mm.
stories and I got curious about what was going on with my clients, and just assumed that I knew. So I started telling again, as opposed to letting them use their words. So it's really important for salespeople that we need to stay curious as well as we're in front of the client, and always make sure that we're figuring out what's going on with them and not just making those big assumptions and saying, well, I already know this, because we don't know what's going on in
Yeah.
those businesses. And that being curious is huge. Plus it allows you to ask questions and you get to learn more about business in general. When I was in starting out in the sales thing and I was in that other networking organization, I always people would be talking about stuff and I'd be able to throw out information. I'm like, well, how do you know that? And it would be about all these different industries. Like, well, because I go to this networking thing and my members talk about it. They talk about what's going on in their business, and hey, we have this going on. I want to introduce these people, or these industries have this going on. We can help them. And so I was like, I'm learning, and it was just because I was curious and wanted to know answers. So yeah, we have to be curious as owners, but totally need to be curious as salespeople too.
Yeah, I love that. Yesterday I had a pretty cool experience. So I went and visited our Atlanta chapter
Wow,
out of Georgia.
Southern boy,
Well, it's really Georgia now. It's
Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia. And they had a guest at their chapter, and they were doing a day where they were doing virtual coffees, and so they partnered me up with the guest that was coming in there, and the president, Jen Pisano, jumped into our room as well, and gave me a chance to meet this nice gal. And as I was talking to this gal, only thing I kept doing is what I love to do is say, okay, tell me exactly who you need to meet. And her first response was a little generic. And I'm like, well, dive into that a little bit more. And she's like, well, I'm really looking for nonprofits. I like working in that space. I said, cool. Let me introduce you to Kyle Stein. He does videography for nothing but nonprofits. She goes, I really want to be in more of the spiritual space. And I said, well, like spiritual woo woo or Christianity side of things. She said Christianity. I'm like, cool. Let me get you to Erin Harrigan, who's a Christian business coach. She can open a lot of doors. Let me get you to Kristen Getzy, who's a cussing Christian, and open these things. And it was really cool. I didn't think much about it. That's just what I do with everybody is I want to dive in and figure out who specifically I need to get them to and make those introductions. But when we went back to the main meeting, Jen Pisano goes, guys, I got to tell you what I just saw. She goes, I saw the master do his thing, which I thought was kind of funny. But she's like, I just watched Donnie make 4 introductions for this gal in less than 5 minutes, only because he was genuinely curious about her world and was asking the questions to completely understand who she needed to get to. And for me, that's a lot of this curiosity thing is if you can be that genuinely interested and curious about the people you talk to, cool shit fucking happens because you're going to be opening doors as these conversations go along. And if you can do that with your prospects and you can get curious about why they do a thing or how they do a thing, and you can get curious about what they're doing, you'll get a lot more clients coming in because you get beyond the superficial shit and you have real conversations. So not only does it help you in the sales side of things, it'll help you scale your business, but you got to stay in a curious state of mind. So you're constantly trying new things, tasting new things, exploring new things, because it's only in the art of going through things that you ever truly learn
Yeah, I
anything.
think as business owners, we get stuck with the mindset of, someone will give us a new idea and our first reaction is like, oh, that won't work. And that is a phrase that, we have to get out of our lexicon. It has to just be gone.
Yep.
And it even, or the other phrase you hear,
Guilty, by the way.
yeah, I do.
Guilty,
I
by the
do it
way.
too. The other one is, oh, well, we've always done it this way.
Yep.
And those are things that, if you've always done it this way, yeah, great, it works now, but is that still going to work 6 months from now? 2 years ago, everyone And I guess that doesn't work well because this is an evergreen podcast. So in March of 2020, let me use an actual date. Someone's going to be listening to this in like 2028 and they're like, what happened in 2026? So what the hell? So in March of 2020, everyone had to do this huge pivot and make all these huge changes to their businesses that they had never considered before. And they'd never even thought about, how would this work if we do this? Because they'd always said, well, this is how we do sales meetings. This is how we do client work. This is how we've always done it. And now they were forced to change. So a lot
Yeah,
of people had to get curious really quickly and make decisions really quickly. But if you're like that all the time, you don't have the big 180-degree pivots to your business. You don't take,
for sure.
left turn Clyde. You don't have that happen. And that is, by the way, one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies.
Clint
Yep.
Eastwood, man.
For us, when that happened, we're like, God, we recognize, and I've been telling the story a lot and everyone's really loving it about, how we were meeting with the hotel when literally the lockdown happened. And
Yeah.
they're like, you can't have events. And we're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to all these businesses going forward? And we didn't have an answer right away, but we did really quickly because we've always had that open mind looking for, all right, what can we do different? What's the next thing we're going to do? And trying stuff out. So, when it happened, it's like, all right, awesome. Let's see what works. And it was an idea that I had at one point said, I am never going back into this world.
You and me both. You and me both. Yeah, I heard Gary Vee say once, and this was a couple years back. I don't even, maybe not even had Success Champions open yet. But he said, if you're not looking for ways to put yourself out of business, somebody else
Yep.
will. And I thought it was a fascinating way to look at what you're doing. And basically the idea is if you're not innovating, if you're not creating, you're not adding new things. And if you don't believe me, just look at any major company, like look at somebody like Kodak. One of the number one companies in the fucking world producing cameras and doing all these things, and then cell phones come out with cameras better than their fucking cameras. And now Kodak had to, I mean, they're now, I don't even know if they're still producing cameras and shit, but they're damn sure completely pivoted their business because they couldn't compete in economy of scale. And it's those type of things of if you're not getting curious about what you can innovate next, what you can build next, what you can bring on, you're at some point going to find yourself, giving up market share to up and comers who found a better way of doing things. MySpace, great example. Facebook came in, took them out of the marketplace, and then you stay in the social media game. TikTok hit the scene, and all of a sudden, Instagram and Facebooks are butt puckering because holy shit, this other social platform is dominating the marketplace. So it's you've got to be constantly curious, constantly innovating. So I think the biggest thing with this, guys, is do you have anything else you want to throw
No,
in?
I was just literally Googling Kodak right now because
Oh, to see what they're doing. No, but I think the biggest thing with all this, guys, is you really need to be curious in your sales calls, curious in your networking conversations, curious in your business and what you're adding, what you're innovating, and allow the people that work with you or for you to get curious in what they do. Because it's that ability to let them go fuck up and try new things that you're going to be finding a thing you didn't even know you were looking for that has a massive impact on your business as a whole. And if you haven't heard the Success Champion networking story, go listen to anywhere Kevin and I have been interviewed on podcast. You'll hear it. Go back and listen to the Success Champion networking episode here. But it was all built out of curiosity.
one,
So,
and then this literally just popped in my head. One of my favorite comic books as a kid, it was a Marvel comic called What If? And the premise of the whole comic was they would make one change in a storyline, and then they would explore what happened to that character if how we knew things happened in that universe hadn't actually happened. So, what if Peter Parker hadn't been bit by the radioactive spider and someone else was? And then they build out this whole storyline of, all right, so what happens if this happens? And I think that concept is as business owners is a great one. You know, we need to be asking what happens if we do this. You know, what if we go out
Right.
and do this thing, and then exploring what those permutations and those branches in your storyline are, to figure out if one of those actually gives you the better outcome you're looking for.
Love that. Love that. So, as always, guys, if you got any tips, tricks, value, anything out of this episode, make sure you're subscribed. Tell one person about it. And seriously, thanks for all the messages and emails and comments and things and the reach outs you guys have been doing. Means a ton. We appreciate you. So, as always, love you, mean it. See you. Bye.